Hi, friends. Dr. Mary Starr here. Today I am here with Carrie Liebich, author of Victorious Mother, Helping Your Child Win the
Natural remedies to help your child win the mental health battle.
So amazing. And just a little quick how we found each other as well is I'm a mom of a son with autism. And for many years, I kind of denied that. I'm a chiropractor. I can fix him. I can get all the natural remedies. But Carrie, I was like picking from this and using that and just going crazy. And I remember one day, um, God just kind of woke me up in the middle of the night.
Really?
And I was scrolling, and I came across something that you had posted or someone had mentioned you. And I was like, oh, and I went to your little profile and I said, oh, Victorious Mother. And I clicked on that and I'm like, oh, okay, thank you, Lord. And I purchased your book. And I was just so blessed. It came in a day. You can purchase it on Amazon. It came in a day. And there was just so many pieces of the puzzle, more pieces of our puzzle that was all together in one book.
No.
Tell us a little bit about your story of becoming a victorious mother, and I'll try not to cry.
I'm gonna try not to cry too. Um, I have so many questions now for you. I almost want to flip the interview.
Okay.
Maybe at the end. So it all started in 2013. Child number 5 got really sick, and she was an infant at the time, 7 months old, and she's had a high fever, about 103, 105, sustained for over a month.
Mm-hmm.
And we were back and forth in hospitals, eventually medevaced from Alaska to Seattle Children's Hospital, where they said that she's just not going to live. Her body was shutting down and they couldn't figure out why. And there were everything they did to try and stop it. It just got worse. So she was sent home to die. And we were given like about a week left to live. And she was just about to turn 1 at that time. And they were doing weekly blood draws. And when I got that, message from the doctor that it's really any day now, I just hit my knees. I hit my knees crying out to God. And I wish I could tell you I had the most amazing faith that he was going to heal her, but I didn't. I didn't. I was struggling with my faith at that time. I was a very firm believer, but I was struggling like, why? Why is this happening? And so I just surrendered her over back to the Lord and said, okay, she's yours. You do what you have to do. And when I was finished like crying, lamenting, and praying, I looked up and I saw this little bottle of oil because I'd gotten oils and we had used them in the hospital, but then we were told to stop.
Mm.
And so I never really understood what to do with them. To me, they were just stinky little bottles of oil. So they sat on my shelf. But I'd gotten one for free called Emmy Power in March of 2013.
Mm.
Remember, this started in January. So we're like 3.5 months into this now. It's in April now. Excuse me. And the bottle had been sitting there for over a month. And I'm like, well, I wonder what it does. So I looked it up in my book and it said it boosts your immune system. So here we'd been doing all these things to suppress her immune system because her body was just shutting down. The organs were just shutting down. I said, well, what happens if I boost her immune system? This isn't working. Let's try this. So I stopped what the doctors were telling us to do, but I didn't tell anybody because we were in the military and that's like medical malpractice and like all the things that you can have your kid taken away from you. So we didn't tell anybody, but I put Immune Power on the bottom of her feet every time I changed her diaper. And from the time that she did that blood draw a week before her birthday, the day before her birthday, she got another blood draw. And then the very next day on her birthday, I got a call from her doctor who was crying. And I'm like, oh, Lord, this is it. This is not good news. And she said, this is the healthiest baby I've ever seen.
Mm.
And I just hit my knees. And I'm like, Lord, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
If you can save a baby from this horrible last 4 months, and what else can you do? And that led me to go, my son, he was the oldest of all of our children at the time. Well, still obviously always the oldest, but he was autistic, ADHD, the most severe case of ADHD that San Antonio, Texas had ever documented. He was hospitalized at the age of 6 on maximum security lockdown, where 24-hour care, they had to watch him so they wouldn't harm himself or others. He couldn't even go to the bathroom by himself. And just admitting him into the hospital at 6 years old was like the hardest thing ever. I thought I was the worst mother ever. But he was a danger to his siblings. He would laugh as they threw bricks at their heads. And so we just, in the rage episodes and all that, and I just knew that that path that I was on with Julie when she almost died, that was the Lord going, no, I have a plan for your health. I have a plan for your life and your son's life. So I started researching, just massively pouring into research. And thankfully back then there was plenty, but it was like underground. And I'm a digger. So I started digging. And I came across Dr. Carl Pfeiffer. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has a clinic out in, I think, Cleveland, Ohio. He's since passed away. But he would take people that had full-blown schizophrenia, which is like the worst mental health diagnosis you could possibly get, and cure them.
Wow.
And his whole premise was all mental health issues are just a serious and significant deficiency in vitamins and minerals. Well, I knew my son, no matter how much healthy food I gave him, it would go in and come right back out. Like 15 minutes later, it looked like it didn't even digest.
Wow.
Whatever he ate is exactly how it came out. Nothing
digesting.
Nothing came. I'm like, so you're not getting any vitamins, any minerals. It's just going right through you. So we started just really researching that. And that's when I learned a little bit about enzymes and the importance of your body being able to break down those. I learned that Young Living supplements, because they're infused with essential oils, they're so much more bioavailable to your body. And I noticed a difference when I was using them. So at the time, he was 10 years old when Jubilee almost died. He was taking 3 antipsychotics, 3 mood stabilizers, 3 ADHD medications, and I think a sleeping pill. He was being drugged as if he was a 300-pound male at the age of 10.
Wow.
And the doctors told me that at this rate, his liver's just going to, crap out on you.
Yeah.
He's not going to live very long. So we knew we were just buying time. And his mood still stunk. He was still we did night shifts. My husband and I would take turns watching him in the middle of the night, because if he got up in the middle of the night, we didn't know what he would do.
Wow.
And there have been many nights where one of us had fallen asleep, and he'd go downstairs and he'd turn on the gas stove and start cooking. And it's a miracle he didn't burn the house down. So we had to take shifts watching him. And just because he was such a danger to himself. So it's not like the medicine made him better. In fact, every 2 weeks we were increasing his meds or changing him out completely. And at one point they overdosed him, and it was just a mess. So we didn't really have a son. Even my friends would comment that he was kind of like a zombie, like a really dark, angry zombie. And I just knew that that wasn't God's plan. So I wanted to wean him off of those medications. And everything you research, you can't do that. They're going to regress. They're going to go back on the medication. And I'm like, no, I think we can do this. So the mood stabilizers, and with Dr. Carl Pfeiffer's wisdom and all the books that he's written, I'm like, okay, if it's a serious and significant deficiency in vitamins and minerals, what can I do to swap out that? And Mineral Essence has lithium in it. I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work, but we started really giving him a lot of Mineral Essence, and I noticed that his mood got better. So I just slowly started tapering off his mood stabilizers, and eventually we got off of them pretty quickly. I think in 10 months he was off of all of his medications.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive. And our first aha moment was probably vetiver. And we had bought it because, all the memes that were going around back then were like, vetiver's the best for ADHD. I'm like, okay, well, I'll get it. And the first time I put it on the back of his neck, I think I was putting on the back of his neck probably like every 30 minutes to an hour. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go through this bottle so fast. And there's no way we could afford it. We were in the military. We qualified for WIC. We qualified for food stamps.
Wow.
We were no money. But the Lord just like, just put it on him and don't worry about it. And so I did. And like day 1, I think I did it like 8 times, but I noticed that instead of going from activity to activity to activity every 2 to 3 minutes, so maybe 5 minutes if I was lucky, I was able to get a 20-minute break. I was able to go to the bathroom.
Wow.
Because he was sitting at an activity for 20 minutes.
Wow.
So yes, I was oiling him like every 30 minutes, but I was able to breathe for the first time. Day 2, I think I put it on him 6 times. Day 3, probably like 3 or 4 times. It just kept getting less and less of how many times I had to anoint him. But his body started to it was like it was a deficiency in vetiver.
Wow.
I have no idea, but his body just started to respond, and I got a break. So never got like a ton, like hours and hours and hours, but I was able to get a good 30-minute break. I was able to take a shower for the first time.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. So from vetiver, that's when I kind of just started researching like, well, let's work on Mineral Essence and multigreens, because if you look into your EOPRs, there's something under Melissa, and it talks about I wish I could remember the term, but in historical fiction, historical data, they would refer to all mental health issues as this, whatever that is. I wish I could remember. It'll come to me. And when I saw that Melissa was used historically for that, I'm like, I've got to get this oil. I have to figure out how to get this oil. But again, we couldn't afford it. So I got brain power and I got multigreens because it has a lot of Melissa in it.
Yeah.
And what do you know? The mood started stabilizing and his body started to respond. And when he started to get a little crazy or wild, I'd give him more mineral essence and more multigreens. He stabilized again.
Wow.
And like I said, in 10 months, we were able to get him off all that medication. And we then went on to do like detoxification protocols, like get rid of the heavy metals in his body. And I'm pretty sure we used just a bottle of Juvicleanse, the big bottle, a capsule a day till the bottle went away. I noticed huge improvements there. It wasn't an easy path that first year at all, but it was worth it because the kid that was so dark and scary became light. And the mood issues were still there, but they weren't scary anymore. Like the mood flexibility was still there. He would, we did get a diagnosis of bipolar in the beginning because he would go from super happy to super, like scary in less than 20 minutes. So they called him an ultra rapid cycler. And he would just flip constantly. If I say, hey, you want a cookie? He could go into full blown rage over his favorite cookie. And that was it. For the next 45 minutes, we'd have a super rage tantrum where people would get hurt. Himself and we would get hurt. He'd claw his face and he'd claw us and he'd throw things through windows and break down doors. And it was scary. But that stopped once we got him off his medications. And he would still rapid cycle through his moods. But even those, instead of being super high and super low, they were more, like gentle waves, much more manageable, and no one got hurt. And I was no longer afraid for his safety and other safety. So that first year, it wasn't easy, but it was definitely worth it. And then every year after that, it got better as we learned more, as we brought in more supplements. CBD was huge for him. And I think he probably had rage episodes up until he was about 16, but not as often. They would spread out over time. So when he would go into full-blown rage, we would use frankincense and my husband would put it on his 2 fingers and then come up behind him and swipe right up his nose. Within seconds, he just calmed right down. And that was another like, what? Is that even possible?
Yeah.
But it was. And so we would keep Sacred Frank on ourselves at all times in case he'd have one. But praise the Lord, we rarely had to do that. And then at 16, that's when we brought in CBD because that's when Young Living started carrying it. And I didn't want to get him high. I wanted to make sure that, there was no THC in it. And that's when we started to notice even more of a shift in permanency of his mood stability, his brain activity, his emotional intelligence started catching up a lot faster.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really impressed with that because even at the age of like 12, his emotional maturity was maybe 6.
Yeah.
And then when he was 16, it was maybe 12. So that gap started shrinking.
Okay.
So now he's 21. I want to say he's still, it depends.
Yeah. And boys generally do mature, like 21-year-old could still be 16.
Right. And I
Normal.
see that a lot of times, like in the fact that he really doesn't want to hold a normal job.
Yeah.
But he wants to do things like get married.
Yeah.
And he's talking about things like that, which before was not even an option.
Yeah.
There was no way. He's had a girlfriend for over a year now. I'm like,
wow. Okay. Yeah.
So things are definitely improving, but Doc Ollie's book on essential oils and CBD, it's perfection. It's amazing.
Dr. Ollie Wenker. Yeah.
Right. It's amazing what our CBD receptor sites and how deficient we are and how when you fill those receptor sites with what your body needs, things just balance.
Wow.
So that was for us like this one last key component.
So the drops of CBD? Okay.
Yeah, that says to put it on topically, but we do it under the tongue.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we would do it on a very I don't want to say militant, but we were very faithful to give it to him morning, noon, and night in the beginning. And now he doesn't do it at all. But every once in a while, if he can feel like a little bit anxious, because now we don't deal with depression. Now we don't deal with rage episodes at all. We haven't had a rage episode in probably, let's see, he's 21 now. I think the last time we had a rage episode was probably 17.
Wow.
Yeah. So we don't deal with rage. We don't deal with really any mood issues at all. But every once in a while, some anxiety can kick in. Okay. Like he's still pretty fearful of fireworks. Okay. The noise just is too stimulating for him. Okay. CBD under his tongue and we're good. But he hasn't had CBD in probably 2 years. So once your body kind of normalizes, and then you just use it as a supplement as needed. Because I think a lot of people get in the habit of just, well, every day I have to take this. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe your body's actually good and you just think you have to take it every day. So really knowing your body and listening to your body. We started listening to him, and he said, I don't want to take mineral essence anymore. I'm like, okay, let's see how you do. And for a while, I'm like, I think you need to take your mineral essence. But now I'm like, no, I think you're good. I think his body's finally corrected to the point where when he eats healthy, nutritious food, he's getting that. And every once in a while, he'll have mineral essence. Every once in a while, he'll have multigreens. But for the most part, he's off all of it now.
So was he nonverbal? When did you first recognize?
I hear all these moms that have autistic kids that are nonverbal. I'm like, that's not my son. Yeah. He's a talker. Yeah. So he was always verbal, even at a really early age. They diagnosed him as oh goodness, there was a term, severe autism, but he was verbal, but he has, as far as emotional regulation, there was zero. At the time, I think, well, in the beginning, it was bipolar. And then they had to take that off because they didn't diagnose any kid. They diagnosed him at 4 with bipolar. You can't diagnose a kid at 4. So they had to take that off. And then they were talking about Asperger's, but then that's no longer a thing. So now it's just autism. And I don't know how they diagnose, but for me, the diagnosis of autism didn't come until he was 16. And it was a huge blessing for me at that time, because everybody was saying, well, he's not autistic, he's just ADHD bipolar. And I tried to fit him into that, and it didn't fit, and it didn't make sense. And I was stressed because there was no aha moments. You know, sometimes you get a diagnosis, you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. Now I understand why this is happening, or what's going on in his brain when this is happening. And I didn't have that until he was 16. Once we got the diagnosis at 16 that he is autistic, I went, oh, I get it now. And for us, instead of holding the bar really high, like you should be able to overcome these emotional deficiencies, we were able to go, not necessarily lower the bar so he could step over, but understand why he's not just making that emotional jump. Whereas a neurotypical child can.
Yes. Yeah.
And having that ability to just give more grace and let him have more time. He's a very slow processor. That's speeding up now, but back then I could say something and there was no brain activity going on at all. And so I had to learn how to communicate with him in such a way that I would tap into that, kind of like he zoned out. And so I'd say, Ezekiel, and I'd wait. And sometimes he'd look up, sometimes he wouldn't. And sometimes I'd have to go, Ezekiel. And then he kind of go, yeah, like I could pull him out of that fog. So I'm about to tell you it's time to get ready for school. And he'd hear that process, that, are you ready for me to tell you it's time to get ready for school? Yeah. And then he'd hear that process, that, okay, I'm ready. Okay, it's time to get ready for school. And that sounds so stupid. That sounds
No. I totally get it. I read it in your book. You have a whole chapter in there, and you even go into more details that helps us as parents, like even with our neurotypical kids, it's just so phenomenal.
Just to break into that, because you don't know where they are. And even as moms, how many times if you heard a kid in the background, mom, blah, 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 and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, you were talking to me.
Yes. And I only have 2.
Go back and replay what I just heard.
Yeah.
So, but an ADHD kid or an autistic kid, when they are gone emotionally, they're in wherever they are circling in their brain. It takes a while to get through that barrier. And before the diagnosis of autism, I would get super frustrated and I would see that as a disobedient thing. And now, because I have the diagnosis, I'm like, oh, your brain doesn't work like mine. I can't expect what I can do from you. I have to do things a little differently. And so just learning his language was probably the most freeing thing I ever did for our relationship. And it really started the healing process, because it's almost the equivalent of he speaks fluent French and I speak fluent English, and neither one of us speak the other language. But once I learned his language and I spoke in his language,
it's huge.
It was huge.
Yeah. Another big chapter in your book that I really love. And I just want to stop here too and say why I love the book so much, and even this conversation for sharing and stuff too. You were right. Is that for sharing is the for parents, right? Because spouses don't always see what we see. We're kind of the researchers, a lot of times the moms.
Yep.
So I was able to give your book to my husband. So we don't want to give all the secrets away of what's in your book because we do want people to go out there and get the book. And then, if you down the road maybe do some consulting or have any programs for moms like me to do that. But I loved the chapter on sleep.
Yeah.
That's
really
another
good. Dr. Carl thing. Dr. Carl Pfeiffer said, well, no, that was his Western medicine doctor. First thing we do, we walk in before he'd give him more drugs is how is he sleeping? Well, he slept 2 hours last night. He slept 45 minutes last night. And that was average.
Yeah.
And he said, that's your litmus test. If you're not getting good sleep, then we know we've got a mood stabilization issue.
Yeah.
And he'd up his meds. I'm like, ugh. But yeah, think about it. How well do you work as a mom when you don't get good sleep?
Not patient. not any of those things. So many good chapters. Let's open up the contents too, just to tell our audience a little bit more of what they can have, because I feel like you've just done all of this work for us. And I'm so grateful to you, to Ezekiel, to your husband and stuff like that too. You teach the essential basics, which I love too. So they can get, well, what is this? Focus and clarity. I love that. The communication chapter is
huge.
You could have a whole book just on that.
That's
that
what my
chapter.
husband says every time.
Yes. So let's diet. We didn't even talk about that, but I think that's important here. And the toxins and poisons, right? Cleansing.
Emotions was another favorite chapter of mine to write, because Ezekiel would tell you probably around 16, he felt abandoned, especially when I put him in the mental health hospital. He was not able to communicate at that time. He was verbal, but he could not communicate in any way, shape, or form to me how he felt, because that's autism. They don't communicate emotions very well. They don't process that. Now he does, but back then there was no way. So he felt like he was just abandoned and left for, not dead, but just left, Well, when I figured that out and he finally was able to tell me as almost an adult, I felt abandoned. I felt unloved, unwanted. I'm like all the tears started coming to my eyes. I'm like, are you kidding me? I love you, kid. But in his young 6-year-old mind. So that broke me. But again, more research and just our neurological pathways, how we have our first emotion of like anger. First time you ever have anger. And imagine this huge field of really tall grass. And it's like you kick a soccer ball down the grass. Well, it's going to part, right? So that's your first time you've had anger. The next time you have anger, that path's going to get a little deeper and a little deeper. And pretty soon you've you got cement sidewalks and then maybe some skyscrapers on the side, because you've really got this path. And people then will habitually go to anger whenever something little pick them off. So learning that really what the essential oils will do to your olfactory is the first thing you think when you smell something, you immediately have an emotional response. It's like putting a pause on that soccer ball from going down that path and going, no, you choose. Let's go down a different path. It gives you the choice. It doesn't force you down a different path. It gives you a choice to create a new pathway, a new neurological pathway. Okay. And then the brain elasticity. I'm like, okay, so son, you feel like I abandoned you. You feel like you're unwanted and unlovable. So I think it was peace and calming. I'm like, I want you to smell this and say, I am wanted and lovable. And the first time he said it, he's like, no, I'm not. And I was just broken. I'm like, yes, you are. And I made him say it every day, several times a day. And I think by about day 30, 60, he could say it and believe it. And now my son feels wanted and lovable, and he feels like he has value. And I think to myself, how many times do we as women look in the mirror and tell ourselves those lies?
Yes. And that's the thing too, is that the book, not to interrupt you, but the book is not just for our kids. It's for us.
It's for us.
It's neurotypical. It's and I love how you labeled it, for mental health, for mental health. So before you share with us how people can connect with you and how they can get the book on Amazon, it's available, or wherever, but I know right now that there's usually about 3 different types of parents watching this: grandparents or friends of someone who has a mental health issue. The first person is just kind of curious, like, oh, thank you. And we probably gave them some good nuggets. The second type of person, they are, oh my goodness, I picked up something,
Mhm.
right? And that's the person that we encourage you, get the book, get it in your hands, get a highlighter out and just start reading and taking those nuggets out. But the third type of person is the mom like me, who's like, Carrie, please offer us something. We want more. We want more of the, like there's the mom who might need consultation, definitely needs to pour in and probably purchase a package of essential oils and Young Living products and stuff like that too. How can they get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is probably the website, victoriousmother.com.
Okay.
And on the website right now, you can go right there and buy the book on the website. It goes directly to Amazon. Or what I really love to tell people about is I've got a 40-minute clip, a video of me teaching on this.
Oh.
And it's free. I don't collect your data. I don't collect email address. If you want to email me, you totally can. If you want to get on my email list, you absolutely can.
Okay.
But you can just go right now and watch that video.
Awesome.
And it gives you 6 critical steps on how to help your kiddo or yourself or a loved one, anyone, grandkid, doesn't matter, on how to help them overcome that mental health battle.
Awesome.
So I'm a big giver.
Thank you.
I have to give because during that time when I was going through it with Ezekiel, I didn't have anybody. We hid it. There was no moms that had bipolar kids. There was no moms that autism wasn't even talked about.
You hid that.
I had to. That I was that well, I didn't have to. It was definitely a choice. But when I tried to talk to people about it, they looked at me like, I just need to spank him more. I'm like, have you seen what happens when I spank my kid? Not a good thing.
Yeah.
It's like, this is not a discipline issue. But when I talked to the doctors, they're like, well, he has a chemical imbalance. Okay, what chemical? Let's balance it. They couldn't tell me. And just nobody understood mental health back then. They didn't know what caused it. They didn't, I mean, we just didn't, like right now, I think it's like every third kid has autism. It's ridiculous. Back then, nobody talked about it. It really wasn't a thing. I feel like I know I wasn't the first, but I felt like I was the first because I just didn't know anybody. So
victoriousmother.com.
that's it.
victoriousmother.com.
Absolutely.
All right. Put in the descriptions. If you watch this, tell us if you're person number 1, just curious. Person number 2, you went and got the book. Or person number 3, you are diving in, watching the video and getting connected with Carrie. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.